Jonah Vale had visited places where the air tasted of metal, places where the rain fell upward, and one memorable moon where the local insects had elected themselves mayor. But nothing had prepared him for the slave market inside asteroid K91. The station had been carved into the hollow remains of an ancient mining rock, then expanded by smugglers until its tunnels resembled the arteries of some diseased mechanical beast. Neon symbols crawled across rusted walls. Merchants shouted in 12 languages. Gravity flickered whenever the station's reactors coughed, which happened often enough that nobody bothered reacting when cups, tools, and occasionally customers floated toward the ceiling. Jonah was there for a plasma regulator. That was all. His cargo ship, the Wayward Sun, had survived 2 wars, 6 owners, and 1 extremely angry customs inspector, but its starboard engine now made a noise like an old man arguing with a kettle. "You need a new ship," the vessel's artificial intelligence had told him. "You need a less judgmental personality. I was designed by military engineers. That explains the lack of charm. It explains why I know you are about to purchase the wrong component." Jonah had muted the AI after that. He found the auction while following a flickering sign that promised legal engine parts, which should have been his first warning. The corridor opened into a circular chamber surrounded by armored guards and wealthy buyers seated behind privacy fields. At the center stood a raised platform beneath a harsh white beam. A woman was chained there. Jonah stopped. She looked almost human. Fair skin, long silver blonde hair falling across one shoulder. A narrow face held too still. Only her ears revealed that she belonged to another people, long, elegant, tapering to delicate points through strands of pale hair. Energy restraints circled her wrists, ankles, and throat. Blue current moved across them in slow pulses. A black translation collar rested against her neck. The auctioneer, a 6-limbed creature wearing too many jewels and not enough clothing, spread his arms. "Rare Alarian female. Educated, healthy, compliant." The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were not compliant. They were cold, exhausted, and furious enough to melt the platform beneath her. Jonah felt something old and unpleasant twist inside him. The auctioneer continued listing her qualities as though describing a machine. The buyers murmured. Numbers appeared in glowing air. Jonah checked the exits. 4 guards near the platform, 2 above. 1 security drone circling the ceiling. Cameras everywhere. His wrist communicator vibrated. The ship AI had apparently unmuted itself. "This is not a plasma regulator," it said quietly. "I noticed. I estimate a 93% probability that you are about to do something reckless." "Only 93? I am allowing 7% for personal growth." Jonah stepped toward a service terminal beside the wall. He pretended to study the auction catalog while connecting a thin data filament from his sleeve to the terminal's access port. The station system resisted. Jonah smiled faintly. Military encryption had taught him patience. Smugglers had taught him creativity. Poverty had taught him that expensive equipment was often repaired with cheap wire and confidence. He entered the security network during the next round of bidding. The woman's gaze moved toward him. Just for a second. Jonah did not know whether she understood what he was doing. He barely understood what he was doing. "Can you open the restraint field?" he whispered. "Yes," said the AI. "Can you survive afterward?" "Try optimism." "I have reviewed the available data. Optimism is unsupported." The bidding rose. A reptilian noble raised 3 fingers. A masked human doubled the offer. The auctioneer laughed. Jonah rerouted power from the ceiling lights into the platform grid. Nothing happened. Then every lamp in the chamber exploded at once. Darkness swallowed the room. People screamed. Someone fired a weapon. Gravity failed and half the audience drifted upward in expensive panic. Jonah triggered the restraints. The energy chains vanished. The woman dropped from the platform, landed lightly, seized the auctioneer by one of his jeweled arms, and threw him into a floating row of chairs. Jonah blinked. So much for compliant. She turned toward him. "Exit," he said, pointing toward the corridor. The translation collar crackled. "Why?" "Because staying seems unhealthy." A pulse blast struck the wall beside his head. Jonah ducked. "Excellent question later." They ran. Behind them, guards shouted as gravity returned without warning, slamming buyers, furniture, and one still screaming auctioneer onto the floor. Jonah and the woman raced through the market while alarms painted the corridors red. His communicator chimed. "The ship is ready," said the AI. "I have also prepared a formal statement explaining that I objected to this plan. Open the cargo ramp." "It is already open." "Then prepare the engines. They are currently held together by optimism." Jonah glanced at the woman beside him. For the first time, despite the pursuit, she almost smiled. They reached the docking bay as gunfire flashed behind them. The wayward sun waited beyond the pressure shield, patched hull gleaming under station lights. Jonah ran up the ramp and turned. The woman had stopped at the edge of the dock. Freedom waited in every direction beyond the station. Hundreds of ships, thousands of routes, she could choose any of them. Jonah held out his hand, not to claim her, but simply to offer a way out. For one long moment she stared at it. Then she took it. The wayward sun tore free from asteroid K91 with 3 security fighters behind it, and one engine coughing sparks into vacuum. Jonah strapped himself into the pilot's seat, dragged the control yoke hard to the left, and watched the stars bend into silver arcs across the forward glass. The woman stood behind him without a harness, one hand gripping the ceiling rail as the ship rolled between 2 cargo towers. She did not scream. Jonah respected that. He had screamed the first time he had flown the maneuver, and he had been the one controlling it. "Docking authority requests that we stop," the ship's artificial intelligence announced. "How politely?" "They have threatened to remove our organs and sell them separately." "So not very politely." A pulse cannon flashed behind them. The blast clipped the rear shield, shaking loose a rain of tools from an overhead cabinet. A wrench struck Jonah's shoulder. "I told you to secure the maintenance equipment," said the AI. "I was busy freeing people. You were buying engine parts. Plans evolve." The woman's translation collar crackled as she looked toward the tactical display. "They are surrounding us." Jonah glanced at her. Her voice was low, rough from disuse but controlled. "Good. The collar works. It translated your words as reckless mammal insults death. That also works." Another blast struck the shields. Warning symbols spread over the console like red flowers. Jonah diverted power from life support to the engines, then immediately restored half of it when the cabin temperature dropped. The woman pointed toward a field of fractured asteroids ahead. "Go there." "That is a mining debris zone." "Yes." "The rocks are moving." "Yes." "You are not explaining the part that makes this a good idea." For the first time, she gave him a direct look. "They will not follow." Jonah smiled despite himself. Now that is optimism. He drove the ship into the debris field. Chunks of iron and frozen gas spun through the darkness, colliding in slow, violent bursts. The wayward sun slipped between them while its damaged engine screamed through the hull. The pursuing fighters hesitated at the edge, then entered after them. "Your prediction was inaccurate," said the AI. The woman leaned over the navigation panel, studying the rotation patterns. Her long ears tilted slightly beneath her silver blonde hair, and Jonah realized she was not simply watching the debris. She was calculating it. "Turn 7 degrees, she said. "That leads toward the large rock. It will move. It looks comfortable where it is." "Turn." Jonah obeyed. The asteroid drifted aside at the last possible second, revealing a narrow passage between 2 tumbling slabs. The wayward sun passed through. The first fighter tried to follow and lost a wing. The second collided with it. The third wisely decided that keeping its organs was more important than winning. Several minutes later, the stars steadied. No pursuit appeared on the sensors. Jonah released a breath and looked back. The woman was still standing. "You know," he said, "seats are provided for decorative purposes, but they can also prevent death." She studied him as though trying to decide whether humor was a human illness. The AI spoke before she could answer. "Medical scan detects bruising, dehydration, neural stress, and several untreated injuries. I recommend immediate examination." The woman's expression hardened. She stepped away from the console. "No examination," she said. Jonah raised both hands. "No examination. You removed my chains." "Yes." "Why?" The question hung in the cockpit more heavily than the alarms had. Jonah looked through the forward glass at the empty dark. "Because they were chains." "That is not an answer." "It is the only one I have." She watched him for a long moment, searching for the price hidden behind his words. Jonah knew that look. He had seen it in refugee camps, prison transports, and occupied cities, people waiting for kindness to reveal itself as another kind of weapon. "You may leave when we reach a safe port," he said. "I will give you supplies, credits, and whatever information I can find about your people. You do not owe me anything." The caller hummed, translating carefully. Her eyes lowered to the broken restraint around her wrist. "My name is Lyra." "Jonah." The ship's AI chimed. "I am Orin, the only competent individual aboard." Jonah leaned toward the console. "You flew directly into a satellite last month." The satellite was improperly placed. Lyra's mouth moved slightly. It was not quite a smile, but it was close enough to change her entire face. Jonah rose from the pilot's seat and opened a storage locker. Inside were emergency rations, a thermal blanket, and a packet of something legally classified as soup. He offered them to her. Lyra took the blanket but examined the ration packet suspiciously. "What is this?" "Food," Orin interrupted. "That statement is under dispute." For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. Then Lyra laughed. It was a small sound, sudden and uncertain, as though it had escaped before she could stop it. Jonah pretended not to notice how much life it brought into the old ship. Far behind them, beyond the range of ordinary sensors, a black vessel emerged from the shadow of the asteroid field. Its hull absorbed starlight. No registration signal marked its presence. Deep inside, a figure watched the wayward sun's fading engine trail and placed one pale hand against a holographic image of Lyra's face. "Found," the figure whispered. The black vessel followed. 3 days after escaping asteroid K91, the wayward sun entered the Veil of Orpheon, a region where dust from a shattered planet drifted between the stars like pale smoke. The particles carried electrical charge, making the ship's shield shimmer and the navigation instruments disagree with one another in increasingly creative ways. One display insisted they were approaching a moon. Another claimed they were inside a moon. Orin announced that both readings were equally embarrassing. Jonah sat beneath an open engine panel with half his body buried in wiring. "Lyra, hand me the blue coupler." She looked at the tray beside her. "There are 4 blue couplers. The angry-looking one. They all look angry. Then the one that seems personally offended." Lyra selected a triangular component with burnt edges and passed it to him. Jonah stared at it. "That one looks disappointed. You should label your tools." I did. The labels caught fire. Over the previous days, their communication had improved, though the translation caller still occasionally transformed ordinary sentences into threats against livestock. Lyra had learned the ship's narrow corridors, the rhythm of its failing engines, and the exact moment Jonah's confidence became improvisation. Jonah had learned that her ears tilted backward when she was irritated, forward when curious, and perfectly still when she was afraid. They had not spoken much about the chains. Instead, they repaired the ship together. Lyra possessed an instinctive understanding of systems far beyond anything found in frontier engineering manuals. She could listen to the vibration of a power conduit and identify a failing crystal lattice before Orin's sensors detected it. When Jonah asked where she had learned such things, she answered with silence and changed the subject. That morning, she found the hidden compartment. It lay behind a false bulkhead in the cargo hold, sealed by a biometric lock older than the ship itself. Jonah had never opened it. Previous owners had tried drilling, melting, and threatening it, but the compartment had remained stubbornly unimpressed. Lyra touched the lock. The metal unfolded beneath her fingers. A sphere rose from the darkness inside, no larger than a human heart. Its surface was black and mirror-smooth, yet stars seemed to move beneath it. The moment Lyra lifted it, the cargo hold vanished. Jonah found himself standing inside a projection of an alien city. Transparent towers rose around them beneath a violet sun. Bridges of light connected floating islands. Thousands of figures with long ears moved through gardens suspended in the air. Then the image changed. Warships appeared above the city. Fire fell without sound. The towers collapsed into clouds of glowing dust. Lyra staggered. Jonah caught her before she hit the floor. The sphere opened like a mechanical flower, revealing a pulse of golden light. Lines of symbols streamed across Lyra's skin and disappeared beneath her collar. She screamed once, sharply, and every system aboard the wayward sun went dark. For 5 seconds there was only silence. Then emergency lights flickered on. Orin's voice emerged weakly from the speakers. "I have experienced death. It was poorly organized." Jonah lowered Lyra carefully onto the deck. "Can you scan her?" "I can barely scan myself." The sphere floated above them, projecting a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of stars appeared, then narrowed to a single point inside an uncharted sector. Lyra opened her eyes. "What is it?" Jonah asked, her gaze fixed on the map. "A memory key." "To what?" She swallowed. "An archive built by my people." Orin restored partial power with a deep mechanical hum. "Correction. I am detecting layered quantum encryption, biological recognition codes, and enough compressed data to bankrupt several governments." Jonah looked at Lyra. "That sounds inconvenient." "It contains discoveries gathered over thousands of years: medicine, energy systems, planetary restoration. And someone hid it inside my cargo wall? Apparently your ship has had a more interesting life than you." Jonah placed a hand over his chest. That was cruel. A warning tone interrupted them. Something had entered the veil behind the ship. The sensor image appeared in broken fragments. A black vessel with no registration, moving without visible engines. Its hull absorbed the charged dust around it, leaving a dark wound in the pale cloud. Lyra went rigid. "You know it," Jonah said. "I know what it means. I know what—" The black ship transmitted a message directly through their systems. No voice came from the speakers. Instead, words appeared across every display. "Return the keeper." Jonah read the message twice. "I assume they mean you." Lyra's face had lost all color. "They destroyed my world searching for the archive." The black vessel released 3 needle-shaped drones. Orin raised the shields. "Our opponents possess superior weapons, superior speed, and superior judgment." "Why superior judgment?" "They did not buy this ship." Jonah rushed to the pilot's seat while Lyra carried the sphere into the cockpit. The drones closed rapidly, cutting through the electrical storm without slowing. "There is no safe route," Orin warned. Lyra studied the shifting currents in the veil. Golden symbols still glimmered faintly in her eyes. "There," she said, pointing toward a violent spiral of charged dust. "That is a plasma vortex," Jonah replied. "Yes. It will tear us apart. Only if my calculations are wrong." Jonah gripped the controls. "Are they?" "I have known you for 3 days. I am beginning to understand why you ask so many useless questions." He laughed once and turned the ship toward the vortex. The wayward sun plunged into white fire. Lightning crawled over the hull. The drones followed, but Lyra reached toward the sphere, and the storm suddenly changed direction. A wave of charged particles struck the pursuers, erasing them in silent flashes. The ship emerged on the far side with smoke rising from the consoles. Behind them, the black vessel remained hidden within the storm. Ahead waited the uncharted star marked by the memory key. Jonah looked at Lyra. "Safe port?" She stared at the golden point in space. "No," she said. "Answers." Jonah turned the ship toward it. The uncharted system did not appear on any civilian map, military archive, or smuggler's route database, which Orin described as a strong recommendation to turn around immediately. Jonah ignored him and guided the wayward sun past a dead blue star, whose light had collapsed into a dim metallic glow. Beyond it drifted the broken remains of a moon, its fragments forming a vast ring around an invisible center. "There is no station," Jonah said. Lyra stood beside him, holding the memory sphere against her chest. Golden lines moved across its black surface like constellations remembering how to breathe. "There is." The sphere projected a narrow path through the moon's debris. Jonah followed it between mountain-sized fragments of stone and frozen metal. Some pieces were covered in ancient structures, arches, towers, and machines embedded directly into the rock. Others rotated slowly in silence, revealing cities sliced open by some forgotten catastrophe. Orin's sensors began producing impossible readings. "I detect a gravitational mass larger than the moon," he said, "located inside a space that appears to contain nothing." "So the invisible station is also impossibly heavy," Jonah replied. "That feels welcoming." The memory sphere pulsed. The darkness ahead folded open. An enormous station emerged from behind a field of distorted space, built inside the moon's surviving core. Its surface resembled layers of black petals wrapped around a central tower. No windows glowed, no engines burned. Yet as the wayward sun approached, ancient lights awakened one by one, spreading across the structure like stars at dawn. A docking corridor opened. Jonah stared at it. "I dislike doors that invite themselves." "You dislike most doors," Lyra said. "Doors usually lead to bills, officials, or armed people. This one may lead to all three." The ship entered the corridor. The outer doors sealed behind them and artificial gravity settled over the deck with unsettling gentleness. They disembarked carrying plasma cutters, medical supplies, and Jonah's oldest pulse pistol. Lyra looked at the weapon. "Does it work?" "Emotionally, yes." Orin spoke through Jonah's wrist communicator. "Mechanically, the probability is less inspiring." The station's inner halls were vast enough for starships, their walls covered in flowing symbols that brightened as Lyra passed. Holographic figures appeared briefly along the path, men, women, and children of her species, all with long, elegant ears and silver or golden hair. They watched in silence before dissolving into light. Lyra slowed. One projection showed a family standing beneath floating trees. A woman held a child whose face resembled hers. Jonah did not ask. At the end of the hall, they entered a chamber containing a circular platform suspended above a bottomless shaft. The memory sphere rose from Lyra's hands and settled into an opening at its center. The station came alive. A voice spoke in Lyra's language, too complex for the caller to translate immediately. The platform filled with images, restored worlds, healed oceans, suns contained inside crystal structures, machines rebuilding cities atom by atom. Then another image appeared. War fleets, empires burning, planets stripped to stone. The archive had not merely preserved knowledge, it had preserved the reason Lyra's people had hidden it. The voice shifted into human speech. Keeper recognized. Light surrounded Lyra. Companion recognized. A second beam fell over Jonah. He looked upward. Companion sounds suspiciously unpaid. Orin's voice crackled. "I believe the station is being polite." The archive scanned Jonah's memories without permission. Moments flashed in the air around them. Refugee camps, battlefield repairs, strangers he had helped and never seen again, the instant he had reached toward Lyra on the dock. The voice spoke again. Compassion threshold accepted. Lyra stared at him. "It chose you. I would like to appeal." Before she could answer, an alarm rolled through the chamber. The black vessel had arrived. Its hull tore through the station's concealment field, followed by 6 attack ships bearing the insignia of the slave syndicate. Boarding pods struck the outer structure. Explosions shook dust from the ceiling. Orin raised the wayward sun's shields remotely. "We are outnumbered, underarmed, and parked badly." The archive projected hostile figures spreading through the corridors. Jonah drew his pistol. It emitted a weak spark. Lyra looked at it. "Emotionally effective," he reminded her. The first armored mercenaries entered the far end of the chamber. Their leader wore a mask of polished bone and carried a weapon capable of cutting through starship hulls. "Return the keeper," he ordered. Lyra stepped beside Jonah instead of behind him. "No." The mercenaries opened fire. The archive reacted. Walls unfolded, releasing silver drones shaped like wings. Ancient defense fields snapped into existence, bending every shot upward. Jonah fired his pistol. To everyone's surprise, including his own, it worked. "Orin," he shouted, "send a distress signal on every frequency." "To whom?" "Everyone we helped. That list is statistically longer than the list of people who tolerate you." "Send it." Across the station, combat erupted. Lyra reached into the archive through the memory sphere, awakening systems dormant for centuries. Gravity twisted beneath the invaders. Corridors shifted. Weapons shut down in their hands. Jonah fought beside her, not as her rescuer, but as her equal. Then the main display filled with distant signals. One ship appeared beyond the moon fragments, then 5, then 50. Freighters, patrol vessels, refugee transports, mining ships, and armed cruisers emerged from hyperspace. Species from a dozen worlds answered Jonah's call. The Syndicate fleet turned toward them too late. Lyra watched the growing lights through the station's holographic sky. For years she had believed her people's legacy ended in fire. Now strangers were crossing the stars to defend it. Jonah leaned beside her, breathing hard. "You seem surprised." "I am. People dislike slavery. They may also dislike owing you favors. That has been my most successful diplomatic strategy." The first Allied weapons flashed across the darkness and the broken moon filled with light. Peace did not arrive with trumpets or declarations. It came quietly, hidden inside ordinary mornings. 3 years after the battle at the broken moon, Jonah woke beneath the amber light of 2 rising suns and discovered Lyra standing outside their house, arguing with a gardening machine. The machine was losing. "You were instructed to water the silver vines," she said. "I watered all plant life within the designated perimeter," the machine replied. Jonah stepped onto the terrace and looked toward the smoking vegetable beds. "Did the designated perimeter include the kitchen?" "The kitchen contained herbs." Lyra turned toward him. Her long, silver-blonde hair was tied loosely behind her shoulders, revealing the elegant points of her ears. She wore a simple dark tunic rather than the armor she had once needed to sleep beside. "Your machine flooded the pantry." "Our machine," Jonah corrected. "The mistakes are yours. The useful devices are ours." That rule had become one of the foundations of their home. They had settled on Eos, a frontier planet restored by technology from the archive. The world had once been a sphere of poisoned soil and dry oceans. Now forests covered its valleys, their leaves glowing faintly after sunset, while artificial moons regulated the tides above a sea newly filled with life. Settlers from dozens of species had built small towns across the northern continent, avoiding the towering cities and political courts that had repeatedly invited Lyra to become a symbol, ambassador, queen, or in one particularly enthusiastic proposal, eternal guardian of civilization. She had declined all of them. Jonah had framed the rejection letters. Their house stood near a lake where translucent creatures drifted beneath the surface like living lanterns. The wayward sun rested in a nearby field, repaired, polished, and still complaining through Orin whenever anyone called it old. "You replaced only 40% of my original components," the AI insisted one evening. "I am historically significant." "You are mostly spare parts," Jonah replied. "That is also true of you." Lyra laughed, and Jonah found himself watching her longer than he intended. Their friendship had changed so gradually that neither of them could name the moment it became love. It may have begun during the first winter on Eos, when the heating system failed, and they spent the night wrapped in thermal blankets beside the engine core. Or perhaps it began months earlier, when Lyra found Jonah asleep at the archive console and covered him with her cloak. There had been no grand confession, only shared meals, repaired walls, familiar silence, and the quiet realization that every plan for the future contained the other. One evening, beneath the pale rings of a gas giant, Lyra asked, "Do human marriage proposals usually involve kneeling?" Sometimes. Why? Possibly to make escape more difficult. She tilted one ear. That sounds inefficient. It is a tradition. Then kneel. Jonah stared at her. I have not asked anything yet. You have carried the ring in your pocket for 11 days. Orin's voice came from the house speakers. 12 days. 6 hours. Jonah looked toward the ceiling. You were not invited. I live here. Lyra held out her hand, smiling. Jonah knelt, laughed at the absurdity of trying to surprise someone who could read stress patterns in his pulse, and asked her anyway. Their wedding took place beside the lake. Human pilots, alien scientists, former refugees, traders and soldiers filled the shore. Ilarian customs required the couple to exchange memories through a neural crystal. Human customs required cake. A misunderstanding nearly resulted in the cake being connected to the neural crystal. Orin claimed innocence. No one believed him. Years later, Jonah would remember very little of the speeches. He would remember Lyra's fingers trembling inside his. He would remember the twin suns setting behind her long ears. He would remember thinking that once, in a market filled with chains, he had offered her a hand without knowing where it would lead. Their daughter was born during a summer storm. The medical chamber glowed with soft blue light while rain struck the windows, and atmospheric generators murmured beneath the hills. Jonah stood beside Lyra, terrified in a way no battle had ever achieved. You have stopped breathing, Lyra whispered. I am trying not to interfere. With breathing? With anything. The infant opened her eyes and released a furious cry that made every diagnostic display flicker. She had Lyra's fair skin, Jonah's dark eyes, and 2 small pointed ears hidden beneath pale hair. Orin scanned her. Healthy, he announced. Loud, genetically fascinating. Jonah took her carefully into his arms. She has your ears. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder. She has your expression. What expression? The one you make before causing a problem. The child gripped Jonah's finger with surprising strength. Outside, lightning illuminated the restored forests. Across the planet, new cities glowed beneath the storm, built with knowledge once hunted by empires. Jonah looked at Lyra and their daughter, understanding that the archive's greatest legacy was not hidden in machines or stars. It was here. A life that should never have been possible. A future born because one person had refused to walk past another person's chains. By the time their daughter Mira was 8, the peaceful life Jonah and Lyra had built on Eos had become considerably louder. Their son Cael had arrived 3 years after her, inheriting Lyra's long pointed ears, Jonah's stubbornness, and an alarming talent for activating machines that had been dormant for several thousand years. On the morning the trouble began, Jonah found both children inside the Wayward Son's engine room wearing oversized maintenance goggles. Mira held a plasma wrench. Cael held something that was humming. Jonah stopped in the doorway. Why is that humming? Cael looked down at the object. It likes me. Machines do not like people. Orin's voice emerged from the ceiling. I dislike you frequently. That is different. Mira pointed toward an open compartment beneath the engine core. We found a crystal. You removed that from the archive stabilizer? We borrowed it. The stabilizer prevents the engine from becoming a small artificial sun. Cael's eyes widened. Can we see? No. Just once? No small suns before breakfast. Lyra appeared behind Jonah, carrying a message cylinder marked with the seals of 7 planetary governments. Her expression was calm, which Jonah had learned usually meant someone else was about to have a terrible day. The council has sent another request, she said. Jonah took the cylinder. For what? They want Mira and Cael examined by the Archive Commission. Mira's ears tilted backward. Examined how? Lyra knelt beside her. They believe your mixed biology may allow you to communicate with ancient systems more easily than either humans or Ilarians. Cael lifted the humming crystal. It already talks to me. Everyone looked at him. "What does it say?" Jonah asked carefully. Cael listened. "It says Orin is rude." "I approve of this crystal," Lyra said. The requests had begun after Mira accidentally awakened a planetary weather array during a school visit. She had merely touched its control surface, yet the ancient machine had recognized her immediately and repaired a drought across half a continent. News traveled quickly. Soon ambassadors, scientists, and military officials arrived on Eos bearing polite smiles and extremely impolite ambitions. Some wanted the children trained, others wanted them studied, a few wanted them placed under government protection, a phrase Jonah understood to mean locked behind expensive doors. He rejected every offer. That evening, a diplomatic cruiser landed beside the lake. Its hull gleamed white beneath the twin moons, and 6 officials stepped onto the grass wearing ceremonial robes equipped with personal shield generators. Their leader, Chancellor Vey, bowed to Lyra. "Your children may represent the next stage of galactic evolution." Jonah folded his arms. "They still argue over who gets the larger dessert?" "Greatness often begins in childhood." "So does biting." Cael smiled proudly. The Chancellor presented a holographic map showing dormant archive sites scattered across the galaxy. Their abilities could unlock technologies capable of protecting billions. "Or weapons capable of controlling them," Lyra said. Vey's smile weakened. Before he could answer, the ground trembled. A column of golden light erupted from the wayward sun. The humming crystal rose through the ship's hull without damaging it, floating into the sky above the house. Symbols spread across the clouds. Mira grabbed Jonah's hand. "We did not do that." "Good," he said. "I was running out of punishments." Orin's voice echoed from every device nearby. "An ancient transmission is overriding local systems. The signal originates beyond the southern nebula." The golden symbols formed an image of a distant station wrapped in chains of black energy. Then a face appeared. The masked leader who had attacked the archive years earlier. "We remember the Keeper," he said. "We remember the human who stole her. And now we know what their children can become." The message vanished. Silence fell over the shore. Chancellor Vey stared at the darkened sky. "The syndicate was destroyed." "No," Lyra said softly. "It was wounded." Jonah looked toward Mira and Cael. Mira stood straight despite her fear. Cael still held the plasma wrench like a sword. The old slave network had spent years hiding in the outer systems, gathering ships, purchasing politicians, and rebuilding its power. Now it understood that Lyra's children could awaken technologies no army could control. The council officials began speaking at once, demanding evacuation plans and military escorts. Jonah ignored them. He crouched before his children. "You are not weapons. You are not keys. You do not belong to any government, archive, or prophecy. Understand?" Mira nodded. Cael frowned. "Can I still keep the crystal?" "No. But it likes me." Lyra placed one hand on Jonah's shoulder. "They will come here." "I know. We cannot keep running." "I know that too." Mira looked between them. "Are we in danger?" Jonah considered lying. Then he remembered every promise he had made about raising them differently from the frightened worlds they had inherited. "Yes," he said. "But danger has made one serious mistake." "What?" "It came to our house." Orin activated the Wayward Sun's engines. Across Eos, defense satellites awakened. Old allies received emergency signals. Former refugees, miners, traders, and soldiers turned their ships toward the frontier world. Above the lake, the stars seemed unchanged. But somewhere in the darkness, an enemy fleet had begun moving. And this time, Jonah and Lyra were not protecting an archive. They were protecting their children. The syndicate fleet reached Eos beneath a sky filled with green auroras. Hundreds of black ships emerged from folded space, spreading across the upper atmosphere like iron thorns. Their arrival silenced every communication channel for 3 seconds. Then Orin restored the network and announced with great dignity, "I have prepared a tactical assessment." Jonah tightened the straps of his pilot seat. How bad? Catastrophic. That is not an assessment. It is concise. Lyra stood beside him on the bridge of the wayward sun, wearing the silver armor of her people for the first time in years. Mira and Cael waited safely beneath the archive station hidden under Eos, protected by guards, scientists, and enough automated defenses to discourage most reasonable enemies. Unfortunately, the Syndicate had never been reasonable. Its masked leader transmitted across the planet. "Surrender the Keeper's children. No settlement will be harmed." Jonah opened the channel. "You traveled across half the galaxy to threaten children?" "They are not children. They are instruments." Lyra leaned toward the transmitter. "That is why you will lose." The enemy weapons fired. The night became daylight. Eos's defense satellites formed a radiant shield around the atmosphere, but the first barrage cracked it into burning fragments. Jonah drove the wayward sun between falling debris, while Allied cruisers rose from the horizon. Miners arrived in armored haulers. Refugees came in patched transports. Patrol ships, merchant vessels, and ancient warcraft filled the sky. Every one of them carried someone whose life had been changed by the archive, Lyra's discoveries, or Jonah's stubborn habit of helping strangers. Jonah once believed survival meant remaining alone. Now an entire civilization stood beside him. "Fleet count?" he asked. Orin paused. "Ours or theirs?" "Whichever is less depressing." "Ours, then." The battle spread across orbit. Lyra synchronized the planetary defenses through the memory sphere, while Jonah led the smaller ships between enemy formations. Cargo vessels released clouds of mining drones. Agricultural satellites redirected solar beams. One elderly transport captain rammed a Syndicate cruiser and then complained over the radio that its pilot had scratched her paint. Even Lyra laughed. Then the enemy flagship broke through. It descended toward the hidden archive, wrapped in black energy that consumed every defensive shot. Jonah turned after it, but 3 destroyers blocked his path. "We cannot reach them," Lyra said. A new voice entered the channel. "Mira." "Mother?" Lyra went pale. "Mira, leave the transmitter. We can hear the archive." Cael spoke behind her. "It is scared." Ancient symbols appeared across every display aboard the wayward sun. Deep beneath the planet, the children had placed their hands against the archive core. The machine recognized them, not as weapons or keys, but as descendants of 2 peoples who had chosen to build something together. Golden light spread through Eos. The restored forests answered first. Energy moved through their luminous roots, into cities, oceans, satellites, and ships. The archive did not release a weapon, it released a message. Across the Syndicate fleet, records of every captive they had taken, every world they had exploited, and every official they had bribed appeared on public channels. Their secrets flooded the galaxy. Captains began abandoning formation. Mercenaries switched off their weapons. Prison transports opened their cells. The Syndicate had survived through fear and silence. In a single moment, both disappeared. The masked leader's flagship continued descending. Jonah pushed the wayward sun beyond its limits. The old ship screamed as it entered the atmosphere, flames crawling across its hull. Orin spoke calmly. "I would like it recorded that I opposed nearly every decision leading to this moment. You also followed everyone. I contain contradictions." Lyra placed her hand over Jonah's. Together they aimed the ship directly at the flagship's energy core. At the final second, Mira and Cael redirected the planetary field. The black shield collapsed. Jonah fired. The flagship's engines died, and the enormous vessel settled harmlessly into the lake beside their house, creating a wave that destroyed the gardening machine. Jonah watched it sink. Lyra raised one eyebrow. "You never liked that machine. It knew too much." The masked leader was captured before sunrise. With the Syndicate's records exposed, its remaining networks collapsed across hundreds of worlds. Former slaves testified. Corrupt governments fell. The markets of asteroid K91 were dismantled, and the old auction chamber became a memorial where no chains were permitted, even as decoration. Years passed. Mira became an explorer who awakened forgotten worlds. Cael became an engineer, though he continued insisting machines liked him. Orin claimed this was impossible while secretly helping him build them. Jonah and Lyra remained on Eos beside the lake. Their hair silvered. Their children traveled farther each year, but always returned beneath the twin suns. One evening, Jonah found Lyra standing at the water's edge. She held the broken restraint that had once circled her wrist. "I kept it to remember what I escaped," she said. Jonah looked toward their home, where laughter drifted through open windows. "Do you still need it?" Lyra considered the metal, then threw it into the lake. "No." She took his hand, just as she had on the docking platform so many years before. Jonah finally understood that he had not carried her into freedom. They had walked there together, step by step, through fear, friendship, love, and the noisy miracle of a family. Above them, ships crossed the peaceful sky. None carried chains.